Hello, Scottish country dance teachers. My name is Jeffrey Selling. I'm a longtime teacher and tutor here in the Delaware Valley branch of the RSCDS in the eastern United States. I've also tutored and taught all over North America and beyond, and for the Teachers Association of Canada. Additionally, I've spent 25 years as an RSCDS examiner, a role I recently stepped down from in order to have more time for other things, particularly being a grandfather. When the Teachers Association of Canada asked me to produce this class, I spent some time thinking about the topic that they had asked me about: teaching technique in social classes for Scottish country dancing. Before we dig into this, I would just like to spend a moment thinking about this title. Scottish country dancing is inherently social, and I believe that all classes, basic, intermediate, advanced, ball prep, technique, even personal critique classes, which do exist, should be social in nature. As soon as we get away from the social feeling of Scottish country dancing, we've lost the heart and soul of it. But by social class, very specifically what is meant, is one of those classes where there's a program of dances and the class comes not expecting footwork or practicing, but just to dance through a group of dances, and the teacher's job is to just do enough teaching, recapping, demonstrating so that people can get through those dances. It's all about just having a good time. And so the question that was posed to me is, how do we work some technique into those social classes? As I thought about this topic, one of the things that came very much to mind is that a great many RSCDS teachers feel that technique is mostly or even entirely about footwork. Pointy toes, turn out, spring beat, bend and reach, and all of that. That's not what I'm going to focus on in this class, because I think those topics and those skill sets are not of great interest to most of the people in social classes. But there are other aspects of dancing that do affect people in social classes very much. For example, deportment, how people hold themselves and carry themselves. Handing really is kind of the glue of Scottish country dancing that binds the formations together. And then there's the phrasing, another thing that links all the pieces together so they work. The teamwork, which gives it a kind of pleasant and enjoyable feeling as people care from one another. The bow and the curtsy is the beginning and end of our dancing and really frames it. The dance etiquette gives it some of that old world graciousness that I hope we never lose. There's the spirit of the dance, something that should happen quite spontaneously, but sometimes needs a bit of encouragement from the teacher. And very, very occasionally, it's appropriate to bring up footwork in a social class, but that's a small piece of the picture. Before we begin, I thought we should think about who might be in a social class. Who is our target audience? There are some dancers who have quite good technique and enjoy working on it, but very, very few of them, and many social classes don't have any such dancers. Then there are dancers who appreciate good technique, but have physical limitations. They may like working on the dancing and on the technique itself, but they don't improve very much because they might be older and kind of stiffer, might have arthritis, might have an injury, or a body like mine that just doesn't have much turnout or point. Then there are dancers who are just not much interested in the technique of Scottish country dancing. They just want to have fun, but they love their dancing enough that they're quite willing to put up with and even participate in some practices. And finally, we have dancers who just want to have fun and avoid any practices by sitting down or coming late or hiding in the restroom or participating with a grudging interest. I think you tend to find a lot of people in those latter two groups in social classes. We do have to remember, though, that if we don't teach our classes some technique along the way, Scottish country dancing devolves into just zooming around from place to place, with many teachers trying to present the most complex dances possible. But there really is such joy to be had in dancing well or even moderately well, but we need to be creative about how we present it, and a light touch will be very helpful. So how do we teach technique in a social class setting. I like to focus on 5 principles. Before I do that, I want to say something about the videos that will be used in this lesson. This lesson was a class filmed in our local Chestnut Hill area with a mixed group of people who were getting ready for the Hogmanay Ball. I was teaching the dance Roaring Jelly by Hugh Foss. And there was a mixed level class with varying ages and varying levels of experience, including some very new dancers. There was no rehearsal for this video, and no one was asked to do anything special. All I did was ask people's permission to make the video. Some people were returning from almost 3 years of not dancing, and this was their first night back, and you can imagine they were a bit rusty. The class was getting ready for the Hogmanay Ball, so we were moving through dances at quite a clip so we could cover many of the dances on the program. We did have 5 students, young people from a university class that does exclusively gender-free teaching. They were unfamiliar with men's side, women's side, first man, third woman, that kind of thing. And that threw me just a little bit at the beginning. I had to be somewhat creative and handle it, and I think it went okay. But there are a few moments where you may see some pauses or some rather unusual phrases in my teaching because I was responding to their situation. And finally, I want to emphasize that the videos focus on my teaching, not on the dancers dancing. But I want to assure any viewer that throughout the class there was a lot of music and a lot of dancing. For each aspect of Roaring Jelly, for example, I would demonstrate it and then have the class dance, 2 or even 3 couples. And then I would make a teaching point, some kind of correction or improvement, and immediately have the class dance it. And then we finally worked our way up to the actual dancing of the dance. And by that time, almost everyone was flushed, and you could see a little bit of sweat on a few brows, and people were all relaxed and warmed up. And by the time we finished dancing Roaring Jelly 8 times through, you could see people were ready to sit down and have a drink and chat and relax just a moment. So there was a lot of dancing throughout this class, and I think there should be in almost all Scottish country dance classes. My goals for the class were to keep the class fun and lively, to keep the dancers moving and hearing a lot of music and, of course, dancing to that music, and finally adding in some technique points here and there as they learn the dance. So the first of the 5 points I want to refer to, I've already mentioned it, expanding our definition of technique beyond footwork to include the other aspects of dancing technique from our Scottish Country Dance Manual. Good dancing includes deportment, handing, phrasing, teamwork, the bow and curtsy, stepping up and down, the dance etiquette, and even the spirit of the dance. All are much easier to improve than footwork. In this first video, you will see me just highlighting an important social moment in the dance and encouraging dancers to look at each other and make eye contact. The first couple are going to cross up and down, and each of us are going to turn to our own right. And we're going to do a figure of 8 across the dance. Big moment here where we're in the middle of it. Hello, partner. Nice to see you. You can say that or just greet with eyes. And I just thought throughout the teaching it's important to call dancers' attention to those social moments. The second thing I like to focus on is selecting aspects of dancing that students can actually improve on rather than impossible goals. I can't tell you how many Scottish country dance classes I've stood in when the teacher urged the class, taught the class, pressed the class to accomplish things that few, if any, were able to accomplish. Here is a list of technique points that most classes really can improve on if one does a little bit each time. Many of them are connected to handing. For example, getting those hand grips at shoulder height with elbows down, you see a lot that's not that way. Not pulling down on turns and rights and lefts and chains. That's something that people, especially in social classes, need to be reminded of. Many of them pull down on every passing of hands in rights and lefts. Giving weight on turns is hard to get around properly without weight given in that turn and a firm arm grip. And finally, palms up in the middle when we're in lines of 3, so we don't spend time flapping hands around trying to figure out who should be up. Here is that being taught. Whoever is in the middle when you have that circle, you put your palms up. And that saves this kind of, just the person in the middle put the palms up. If someone doesn't do that, don't slap them. Don't fight about it, just take what they did. But in general, in Scottish country dancing, the person in the middle puts the palms up, and it just saves a lot of monkeying around. Other points about handing that can be taught easily in social classes. Making eye contact as you give hands. So often people just pass by without looking at one another. Letting go of hand grips soon enough so that the dance can flow. How often have you as dancers been in a set doing rights and lefts where someone clung on too long? Leading with extended chest-height arms and hands, especially on down the middle and up. It just looks so much better if people extend that hand rather than let it hang down. And not taking hands until the phrase actually begins. In fact, here is that moment being focused on. To somebody, it's not just right hands and kind of on, go on by. This is a meeting moment, so you're taking right hands and right eyes. So be sure you don't stick it at the person, but you would just sort of imagine you were standing in a pond of water. You can bring your hand up, you're inviting them to cross, and then you let go. The twos move up. And again, you invite them across, and you cast your own right. Okay, thank you. Can we move that up? Can our new... And it's worth mentioning that after each demonstration of a teaching point, I immediately had several couples dance that, with that correction, to music. There are other achievable teaching points that aren't focused on handing: deportment and posture. Standing tall and upright, especially when people are standing out at the ends, when they often kind of just hang there and it's kind of just let themselves relax and do nothing. Not leaning sideways on turns. Many people think that that's how you give weight, is kind of leaning out rather than actually giving a firm grip. And keeping eyes ahead rather than downward, especially on reels and solo tracks. There are people who give eyes very well when they are doing a rights and lefts or a chain, but when a reel happens, when they're sort of dancing by themselves, they look at the floor. And then there's all kinds of phrasing points. Being ready to start formations, especially reels on bar 1. Pacing each formation to fit the music. Anticipating what comes next. So dancers are in place and settled as the next movement starts. For example, how you finish the dance on the sides ready for the next repetition. Here is that being taught. Get all the way back to the other side because the dance begins cross with the right hand. And if you are kind of lagging behind, you could be crossing to the other side, so let me put you back there. So if you're kind of lagging a little behind, 7, 2, 3, and 8, 2, 3, this is 1. You're supposed to cross, and what often happens, people just slingshot each other out. Doesn't look very good, doesn't feel very good. So be sure you get that. That couple step to the bottom, please. And of course, that would immediately then be danced. Other achievable technique points. Teamwork. Working on the stepping up and down with the music as opposed to just kind of shuffling out of the way when you have to. Being ready to start those reels, the chains, and the other formations so that you interact in a timely way. That's a real courtesy to the other dancers. Helping older or injured dancers or less capable dancers. When I have an older dancer or someone who's injured coming to me and I'm the corner, I step in a ways to make the diameter of that turn smaller and more achievable for that person. And covering. So many people are just oblivious, even at the most obvious covering moments. And then there's the bow and curtsy. If we do them well, they make dancing so social. Here is the stepping up and down being presented. Step up, we're not just getting out of the way. This is part of the dance. So on bars 3 and 4, we're going to step in, cross, up, together. And we're going to do it on the balls of our feet. And we're going to look at each other so we're not just kind of shuffling out of the way because here they come. We're actually making that part of the hands. Everyone join hands in the whole line. And you can imagine, as soon as I had demonstrated that, I had the class try it, first just walking and then with music. Other achievable technique points. The etiquette. Several times each season, I teach the class how to ask a partner and how to be asked. It's amazing how quickly people forget and get overly casual or sloppy about that. I am rarely in classes when that is gone over. I remind the class often to thank the partners and their set after each dance. And it's amazing what a difference that makes. Then there are specific improvements to particular formations. For example, in rights and lefts, working to keep it square rather than a little circle, not pulling the hands down, and be sure to let go in time, something I've already mentioned, and using 2 steps for that polite turn rather than step and pivot. In quick time poussette, not bouncing the arms up and down, which I see so often, and using 2 steps to retire rather than retiring once and standing in place. In Allemands, how useful it is to not have that first couple swing up into the next set or the open space there, because then the trailing couples can't get around on bar 4 to face down. And speaking of bar 4, getting everyone to face down on bar 4 just creates such a nice phrasing of that formation. And keeping the arm positions comfortable for the women by having the men not pull back with the right arm. I think many men have never danced the women's part of an Allemand and felt how awkward and uncomfortable that can be. Then there are other easy technique points that can be brought up for formations. Grand chain, the 1-1-2 phrasing, making eye contact with each passing dancer, and the polite turn that often comes at the end. We have reels of 3 and reels of 4 that occur so often, anticipating which way to go. It's worth teaching our classes the rules of thumb, that after turn corners and partner and set to and turn corners, we almost always dance a 6-bar left shoulder reel. But after set to corners and partner, we almost always dance a right shoulder 6-bar reel. It's worth teaching those things. Then the class isn't as dependent on us for information. When to include and omit the loops at the end of reels. For example, in Dumbarton drums, there are no loops put on. But at the end of Miss Milligan's Strathspey reels of 3, there are loops. So it's worth pointing those moments out so the class can dance the dance correctly. Phrasing, so as not to be late or to finish early. And of course, covering. Here is the business of starting reels being taught to a class. The other thing is I want the 2s and 3s to watch the 1s as they're doing their figure of 8, but your reel should start immediately on bar 1. Don't stand there. Okay. Oh, she's going this way. Okay, here I go. She comes around the corner, 7, 2, 3, 8, 2, 3, and 1. So be ready. Think about where they're coming. So let's have one more repetition. And I do have to say that after that repetition, everyone started the reel on bar 1, and it made a real difference. And then, do we put loops on or not? And you'll see there's a little catch on this one. When we arrive, it happens so naturally. Person on this side is facing up, person on that side is facing down. And we're going to give a right shoulder for the reel of 3. Let's just walk as a demonstration. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and everyone should be home but the 1s at this point. And it was interesting, the young woman you see there who is not back in place and was about to put a loop on is a very new Scottish country dancer, and this was a new teaching point for her. So it was a good moment to demonstrate that, and after that she successfully completed the reel in 6 bars without a loop. Another formation that just always needs work is double triangles. There's the bringing of hands up on 1 and 5 and down on 2 and 6 rather than just any old time. There's fully extending the arms so double triangles doesn't look and feel like balance in line. There's the supporting couples moving in and then back to keep the first couple back to back. If you look at most of the Newcastle Festival demonstration teams, they all do that, and it's something quite easy to teach your local class. And finally, not bouncing those arms up and down while setting, just as in the poussette. Those are all things that classes can easily learn. Then there are points of technique which are particular to a specific dance. For example, in Roaring Jelly, if you don't break the circles and get a second couple back up to first place, then the reel of 3 doesn't have much place to go. Here is that being taught. And could you be between the third couple? And I'll stand here. You two move up. We're the first couple now. So what's happening in almost all the sets is would you just walk the circle, everybody with me here, around, and then we're coming back to here. And the problem is that this second couple is back in second place. But you remember how they step up? Well, we need to finish up in first place at the end of that circle. And you need to finish in third place. Okay? So as we dance the circle around, that's one thing. As we start to break the circle, particularly break on those ends so we can finish up and you can finish down. And there are so many little unique teaching points that occur in particular dances. It's worth noticing them and teaching them to our classes. Most dancers, regardless of age or skill level, can learn and actually achieve many of the teaching points I've listed above. And by the way, there is a list of that will be available at the end of this class so that anyone who wants this list of teaching points for social classes, you can download it or access it. The third point I want to focus on in teaching technique in social classes is making only a few points each evening. You don't have to fix or improve everything, or even most things. The fourth thing I focus on is appreciating and encouraging what the class does. I have been in so many Scottish country dance classes in my life when the class danced quite well and there were really some excellent moments, and when teachers just didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge, didn't encourage. When you see a point well danced, compliment the dancer or dancers. Let them know they've done it well. And even better, ask them to show the class. Miss Milligan used to do that all the time. She would ask a couple to demonstrate something. I remember one point when she asked me personally, with my wife, to demonstrate something. I felt I was floating on cloud 9. Here is me asking 2 very new Scottish country dancers from the university class to demonstrate the handing at the beginning of Roaring Jelly. I want to just point out that the music you'll hear is not Roaring Jelly because we were doing enough practices. I didn't want to wear out the tune. I waited till we were getting very close to actually dancing Roaring Jelly 8 times through before I brought on the wonderful tune. Hands pull by. Would you demonstrate? I'll give you the music. And I happen to know that when they got back to their local class, they told their classmates that they had been singled out. This was the first time they'd ever gone to a branch class versus their university class, and they were very proud of themselves for being singled out and getting to demonstrate. I'll also mention just an incident from long ago. I had an older gentleman in my class who didn't have particularly good footwork and wasn't a great dancer, but he had a military background and he had wonderful upright bearing. And I once asked him to demonstrate lead down the middle and back, which he did with his beautiful posture. And the class gave him a round of applause, and of course he had done a good demonstration. His wife told me at the next class that every single day between the 2 classes he had said at some point that he just couldn't believe that he was pulled out and asked to demonstrate. It made him feel very special. Asking class members to demonstrate does 3 things. First of all, it gives the class a good model. Secondly, it gives the class a community feeling. Not every demonstration or every teaching point needs to come directly from the teacher. And finally, it makes that individual feel very good and want to come back to the class. I know that's how I felt after Miss Milligan asked my wife Cecily and I to demonstrate something. The last point I want to focus on here, do not keep reteaching your candidate exam lesson 10, 20, or even 30 years later. So many teachers do. There's no examiner in the corner in your community center, in your class, checking off an assessment sheet to make sure that you covered every possible teaching point in each step and each formation. Your teaching exam is history, possibly, like mine, ancient history. I did my teacher certificate in 1974. It's a long time ago. You don't have to mention, much less improve, every element of a rights and lefts in one night. Less is more. You have many nights over the course of the term to bring in the various teaching points. Teach a few well-chosen points in each class, demonstrate each element, briefly have the dancers practice, and then get on with the dance. It's a social class, after all. And don't forget to point out to the class where in the dance that teaching point actually occurs. Also, be a good model yourself. Don't just kind of slop through things. Always be the best model possible. Use all that great material from the RSCDS manual that you learned in your candidate class to help guide your planning, but keep the actual dancing short and sweet. And if you don't know that dance from Book 30, it's a wonderful 40-bar jig with great music. A few final reminders, not only about social classes, but any class. Whenever you are talking, the class is or should be watching you demonstrate, or they are walking rhythmically or practicing in some way. Standing around is deadly. So this brings us to the end of this class, and I would like to offer some thank yous to Mark Dorfman for being my videographer, editor, and advisor and troubleshooter. My wife, Cecily Selling, for encouragement and lots of help with PowerPoint and other things. The Teachers Association of Canada, the TAC, for their encouragement and having the confidence in me to produce this class. The Chestnut Hill class for their patience and willingness to be filmed, and endless good spirits and cheer year in and year out, not just on the night we shot these videos. And finally, to others, Jack Pope, Ward Flary, and Jill Emery for much assistance with the videos and PowerPoint and getting the videos to play properly in PowerPoint. I can't tell you how many challenges there were. So thank you very much, and I hope you found this helpful.